Welcome to Discovery Watch with John Kaiser.
I'm Jim Goddard. John, Adamera Minerals published results this week for the Overlook hole they assayed last week. Was the rush worth the extra cost?
It certainly was, because Adamera Minerals has been struggling to turn around a downtrend caused by all the delays that they've had with drilling targets on the Cook Mountain project of northeastern Washington. Hole number 6 was targeted to test the northwest extension of an EM conductor that passes right through the old Overlook mine. It has sort of a northwest southeast trend, and it appears to be the structural control for the high-grade gold mineralization that was mined by Echo Bay until it shut things down some time ago. Now, this hole, it was almost a vertical hole, and it was spotted about 60 meters northwest of the known extent of the Overlook mine. And as we discussed last week, at first they thought maybe the maps they got from Kinross were wrong, and they had drilled through the old workings, but it turns out that they had simply drilled through a couple of voids, what are in the industry are called karsts, which is where the limestone has been rotted out to create kind of an underground cave. Anyways, that at around 199 meter depth, they managed to nip 2 intervals, one 2.1 meters at 9.9 gram per ton, and then about 10 meters deeper, another 11 meters of 9.6 grams per ton gold. We don't know if this is true width, because it's a near vertical hole, and they don't know exactly what the orientation of the zone is. So they've got a second hole set up just to the northeast of this one to get some, two-dimensionality on this. But this is a very positive development. It suggests that there may be, another 300 meters of mineralized zone extending to the northeast of Overlook. It's only 5 kilometers away from the Kinross mill. So piecing together these small tonnage of high-grade gold, that's always been the consolation prize scenario for Adamera. Now, the standalone scenario where they test an entirely new target, that's the thing that's been driving them crazy. They have the SE01 EM conductor. It appears to be only 300 meters long, but it's interpreted to be only 20 to 30 meters beneath the surface. In other words, fairly shallow drilling. If they can confirm that this is a mineralized body of the same style as that Overlook, then they have a new discovery on their hand. But their problem has been getting permitting for this target. It falls within Forest Service land, and the Forest Service it supervises the clear-cut logging in this area, which of course makes it very, very concerned about the disturbance a small drill pad would make in this target area, where I guess the trees haven't been completely wiped out by the loggers. So they've been coming up with all kinds of new hoops for the company to jump through. Now they've decided that the local native band needs to check this out to make sure that there is no heritage disturbance possible in this area. But it seems that the company's patience in working with the Forest Service is starting to pay off. They hope to have the drill permit soon, and they'll be drilling this target. And this target is several kilometers to the south of the Overlook oversight property area. It's in a completely new area where nobody has ever bothered to drill. The target emerged last year when they did that regional geophysical survey. They have been doing soil sampling. With their XRF unit, they're able to detect the pathfinder elements associated with this style of replacement deposit. They don't know, of course, gold, because XRF units don't detect gold. They're still awaiting the geochemical results from the lab to confirm what the gold content is. But they're pretty optimistic that once they get drilling on SE01, they will make a new discovery. But again, the truth machine will tell us at the end of the day what they do have. And the 300-meter, apparent extent of this may sound small, but geophysics being what it is, this could just be the tip of an iceberg that extends much deeper and has a lot more to it than would be suggested by the geophysical signature alone.
We'll have more Discovery Watch with John Kaiser right after the break.
Hi, I'm Douglas Mason, President and CEO of Magnum Gold Corp. Inc., MGI on the TSX Venture Exchange. A 2015 drill program on the LH property intersected high-grade gold, including 16.9 meters of 13.58 grams and 11 meters of 20.66 grams per ton gold. A follow-up drill program is planned to further evaluate previously identified subsurface high-grade gold mineralization. Please visit our website at magnumgoldcorp.com.
Glance Technologies owns and operates Glance Pay, a disruptive mobile payment technology now live in 16 cities in Canada and about to launch in the US. With revenues up 664% in the last quarter, Glance Technologies has the potential to be a worldwide leader in an industry projected to grow to $1.3 trillion in 3 years. Glance Technologies stock symbols are GLNFF in the US and GET in Canada. Find out more at glancepay.com.
Welcome back. We're chatting with John Kaiser. John, NV Gold published an update last week for its ATV drill program in Nevada. Is there evidence of a new discovery across the valley from the 20 million ounce Twin Creek gold mine?
There is tentative evidence that they are in the right area. Now, the Twin Creek gold deposit was discovered in, I believe, the late 80s. It was discovered by Santa Fe Pacific doing grid drilling on the gravel flats to the east of the range, where there had been some indication of gold mineralization in the range, and eventually Santa Fe got the bright idea to go out there and let's just start poking holes through the gravel and hope that we hit something. And they almost didn't hit something because the mantra back then was, if it isn't within 100 meters, it's no good. So the first driller who was running the program made a decision to only go down to 100 meters. Back then, Wade Hodges, who was running the program in general, came and said, "Why have we stopped here? We're seeing alteration in the hole, even though there's, no evidence of good mineralization. We're on the edge of something. You drill deeper. You get down there." And they did, and then they encountered the Twin Creeks deposit, which is now up to 20 million ounces. Now, the ATV property is short for across the valley, because literally across Kelly Creek Basin, there is an area which has been pretty much off limits for poke and hope type drilling, because this part is affected by the checkerboard that was granted to Santa Fe, and some of it ended up in the ownership of others. In this case, the mineral rights ended up with a ranching group, which didn't really want to let anybody into this area. But it's always been a prospective area at the edge of the Snowstorm Mountain Range, and John Watson was able a year or so ago to finally strike a deal with the ranchers to allow his company, NV Gold, to option this property and go in there and drill it. And in our prior Discovery Watch discussion, we pointed out that they went and did a BLEG sampling program where you collect samples from the streams and you measure it for the presence of elements that might be related to something nearby, and they got some interesting results from the rangefront, which itself is probably not going to be very interesting. But down in the flats, they did gravity surveys and established, looks like the basements or the bedrock's not too deep. So they mounted a grid drilling program, and this program has encountered the bedrock at 200 and 260 meter depth. Most of the holes were still into upper plate. They are seeing evidence of alteration, which is good. But one of the holes did go into what they describe as lower plate carbonates, and they show evidence of decalcification, which means it's been pumped by fluids, and the lime calcium has been leached out of it, which creates a very good sponge for the gold and other Carlin type pathfinder metals to drop out and create the target. So this thing is part of the whole Nevada 2.0 exploration that's getting underway. There's been 300, 400 million ounces already identified in this central part of Nevada, where you have the same-aged upper plate rocks thrust over the lower plate rocks. The upper plate rocks are tighter siltstones farther out to sea, whereas the lower plate rocks are the carbonates or limestone formed in the shallows, and those are much more receptive. And by a tectonic coincidence, the same-aged rocks, the siltstones got pushed on top of the lower plate, and they've served as a kind of a cap, so that when the hydrothermal fluids come up carrying the metals, when they hit this cap, they tend to pond underneath and travel along the lithologies, and you get these very big Carlin-type deposits. So they are raising $910,000 to carry on. They think this area is fertile, and they will be doing more drilling to figure out where exactly the lower plate all is. And interestingly, part of the whole Nevada 2.0 is looking under these gravels to find these targets. And we talked a couple of weeks ago about Nevada Exploration, Inc. It turns out that way back in the late 80s, after the Twin Creeks deposit was discovered, a government geologist for the USGS called David Grimes did what was a fairly expensive groundwater sampling program all around. All this data has been retrieved from the archives, digitized, and it shows that when you do a hydrogeochemical survey of the whole area around Twin Creeks, it shows up distinctly as a gold-rich plume along with all the other toxics associated with Carlin-type deposit. So unfortunately, this has not been done in this area. It would be nice to know if there's a similar plume sitting there, because, again, it is very difficult first to find a prospective area under the gravel, but even when you have it, it isn't necessarily simple to find where these high-grade Carlin-type deposits have squirreled themselves away. So it would be good to know if indeed there is a big prize to be found across the valley from Twin Creeks at the foot of the Snowstorm Range.
Carlin Gold published an update for a deep hole Barrick has drilled on its Cortes Summit project in Nevada. The market barely yawned. Was it a bust?
You know, this one really puzzles me, because the news release was only about the upper 1,000 feet or so of what is an incredible 5,171 foot hole that Barrick has drilled in the southwestern corner of this property since optioning it last year 70% by spending $5 million US by 2020. Now, this deal required them to spend $500,000 roughly by September 1st. They completed the hole at the end of July, and in this news release we get a description of upper. You know, first they go through these volcanics, younger basalt, sort of 15 million years ago. And by the way, there's two dimensions to Nevada 2.0. One is the portions where of Nevada where the basins have formed, where the rocks got dropped down. All the really good Carlin-type gold deposits formed between 40 million and 25 million years ago. And then everything went quiet, but then 15 million years ago, Nevada started to rift, and so you had these northeast trending basins, chunks of rock drop down. And whatever was in there ends up just being arbitrarily either popped up or dropped down. So the other thing is, at that same time period, the northern Nevada rift flooded the region with andesitic basalt, basically paving over everything and obscuring what's underneath. And in this case here, they've had to drill through the hopeless andesite in this area. They've gone into the upper plate rocks, the siltstones that we talked about earlier. And what they're seeing in there is alteration and and they're seeing all the Carlin-type toxics, the thallium, the antimony, the arsenic, and they did get a 3-meter interval of 2.6 grams per ton. So that's very encouraging. And Barrick is still studying the rest of this core. There's another 4,000 feet before it goes into the bottom. And this target is interesting because just to the west in what they call the 4-mile structure, that's the sort of northern extension of, or just north of the Gold Rush system, which is a 12 million ounce system that Barrick is pushing towards production. Barrick has encountered very high grade mineralization similar to the deep post that they have in the Carlin Trend itself. So this mineralization is somewhat different from the Gold Rush itself. It's potentially, because of the high grade, it is very interesting to Barrick. So it'll be fascinating to see maybe in the next month or so what the rest of this hole looks like, if indeed the same sort of environment as Barrick has on its own ground is present on the edge of Carlin Gold's project. The market didn't react because it didn't see anything particularly meaningful, and they would assume that, if there was anything exciting in the bottom 3/4 of the hole, Barrick would have put something out much sooner. So there is that to consider, that maybe they're not seeing anything special in the deeper part. But on the other hand, until we've actually seen a full analysis, you can't write this hole off as a bust. And Carlin Gold is interesting in that it is an exploration junior. It is not one of these optionality companies. And that is interesting because the biggest shareholder is Electrum Gold, which owns about 29% of the stock. Electrum Gold is a fund controlled by Tom Kaplan, a billionaire who has sort of teamed up with John Paulson and beats the drum about gold going to the moon because of all the bad policy decisions being made by governments and so on. But this is an example where he has invested in old-fashioned discovery exploration, and this property is right on the edge, less than a couple kilometers from the Gold Rush system. So it remains to be seen if there is something deep, and even if it's 5,000 feet deep, it doesn't matter if it's going to be similar to what Barrick has picked up north of the Gold Rush deposit.
We'll have John Kaiser's closing comments right after this.
Lotus Ventures Inc. is a BC-based medical marijuana company poised to launch into the rapidly evolving cannabis sector. Lotus is in the final review stage of the Health Canada approvals to become a licensed producer, having arranged facility financing of up to $12 million, plus building permits for its prototype indoor production facility. Shares trade under the symbol J on the Canadian Securities Exchange. Visit our website at lotusventures.ca.
Hi, I'm Douglas Mason, President and CEO of Rainy Mountain Royalty Corp, RMO on the TSX Venture Exchange. Rainy Mountain's Brunswick property is located in the Rideout Shear Zone in Ontario, with grab samples running as high as 32 grams per ton gold. A follow-up drill program to test the numerous targets located by recent groundwork will commence later this year. Please visit our website at rmroyalty.com.
Welcome back. We're speaking with John Kaiser. John, Artemis Resources had a big week while 50% partner Novo Resources went quiet. What was the fuss about?
On October 26th, Artemis announced that Sheikh Maktoum Hasher had been appointed to the board. Now, he is a member of Dubai's royal family from the United Emirates and Arab Emirates, and very, very wealthy family. This individual is, judging by the photo, he must be in his early 20s, though we don't know quite what the photo's dated at. He has been involved in a number of business enterprises and has worked with the Artemis chairman, David Lenniges, on African mining projects. So this is a member of the Dubai royal family who has familiarity with mining, and he has joined the board of this obscure Australian-listed company, of which the Australian financial community has historically not had a huge amount of respect, which is understandable because they had to do a 20-for-1 rollback just last year when David Lennigus came on board. They've been all over the map with different projects, including funding a movie. So it really is interesting to see a member of one of the wealthiest families in the world suddenly join the board. Now, normally when you see something like that, it comes in conjunction with a large stake being acquired in the company. In this case, it's just a board appointment. And I asked David Lennigus, well, so what? Where's the skin in the game? And the message I got was that the Dubai crowd has been following Artemis very closely, and it is quite likely that they already have significant skin in this game. But yes, okay, so here's a little Aussie Junior. It's gone from 6 cents to 30 cents. Why put the royal name, the royal stamp of approval on this company? And I think what's happening is that these players in the Middle East are starting to appreciate that what's going on in the Pilbara is something very special. And that something very special is the Wits 2.0 hypothesis that this nuggety gold that we're seeing at Purdy's Reward, which is joint ventured 50-50 with Novo, is not just some local freak show from some little gold vein up in the hill that got eroded and dumped into some channel here at the edge of the basin. That this is part of a massive regional precipitation event, or perhaps better described as a crystallization event, where the emergence of oxygen through these microbial bacteria engaging in photosynthesis that generates oxygen resulted in a large amount of gold being dropped out of ocean water, into which it had become dissolved at what is probably 10,000 times what it is today. So we're talking about something that's possibly even bigger than Wits 1.0, which is 2.6 billion ounces, and probably more if you go deep enough into the Wits basin. This thing could be an order of magnitude bigger. So we're seeing very big players take note and not being afraid to lend their name to a junior that has a piece of this. Now, you mentioned that Novo has been relatively quiet this week. One of the things that's sort of dampening market enthusiasm is Quentin Henney has been telling everybody we probably won't have results from this large diameter drilling until January. Maybe if we're lucky, we'll have some in December. And the market's sort of thinking, we've got like 2 months of nothing changing. And at this point, the only really empirical information we have is one data point, which is that 542 kilo sample from that 1 2-meter by 2-meter pit in the middle of the portion of the conglomerate bed where it daylights on Purdy's Reward. And of course that had very impressive numbers, like 67 gram per ton gold, but the very largeness of this actually harms the credibility of the story, because you say, okay, so you found some little pocket where all the gold nuggets had managed to roll in, and you dug this up and you processed it and you get this insane 2 ounce per ton grade. What's it going to be everywhere else? And the purpose of this large diameter drill program is to follow the bed down dip towards the edge of the property, which at the farthest point is about 2,800 meters. And I've done calculations. If we use something like a 4-meter average, 5-meter average for this potential portion of the conglomerate bed would represent 80 million tons. And say, okay, maybe plus or minus 20 million tons based on everything you see regionally, the conglomerate bed is going to be present. The real question is, what is the average grade for the gold going to be? And of course, measuring that gold grade reliably is one of the big challenges, which is a reason that Novo is in no rush to dump a bunch of results on the market, because it wants to assemble a large enough statistical database of the the way this stuff grades so that they can be comfortable that when they publish numbers, it means something. It isn't just a random collection of erratic numbers. So the market's kind of cooling its heels, wondering what's going on there. I've done, however, an outcome visualization where I imagine, well, what if this is, we take these 80 million tons and mine them over 22 years as an underground mine. Maybe a part of it near surface will be strip mined. But let's do a 10,000 ton per day mine with a $60 a ton operating cost and a $400 million capital cost. What would that be worth at different grades? And here's an idea of how sensitive this system is to grade. If the average grade is 2 grams per ton, it's worth nothing. It's got a negative NPV. At 5 grams per ton, however, you get a number at like $1.5 billion US. And at 10 grams, it jumps to $4 billion US. If you punch in an insane number like 30 grams per ton, in other words, you have 80 million ounces of 1 ounce per ton ore here, well, then it jumps to a staggering $15 billion of NPV, after-tax NPV, and that's hammering it with a 14.5% discount rate, which is risk-adjusted based on, big issues like the technical risk of whether or not you're ever going to have a reliable method of measuring this. So when you convert that to Aussie dollars, that's like $5 billion or 20 billion at the upper end for the 5 billion Aussie for the 10 gram per ton scenario, and you start doing the number, you can see, okay, here's an Artemis with its 550 million fully diluted shares. At the end of the day, something like this could end up being worth, $4 or so. It doesn't deserve to be worth that yet because we're still only delineating the discovery, but it gives you a sense of how important the grade is. Now, I think we may get news on grade sooner than January, and it's hard to tell, but they have now, from the portion of the conglomerate bed where it daylights, and they've got at least 400 meters stripped, and they've been doing the scout drilling down dip 200 meters from that, but this whole thing extends for at least 1,000 meters before it plunges underneath overburdens where it's probably not worth the bother to strip it. But this bed, which at the oblique angle will be anywhere up to 100 meters wide, they have been detrenching this, and I've heard a report that there's now 30 drums of sample material, 500 to 1,000 kilograms, waiting to be shipped to Perth, where Nagram now has the Steinert sorting machine ready, and it's apparently this Steinert machine could crunch these 6 of these samples per day. Now, to get the metallic screen assays for the sorted tailings is going to take a little longer, but it's conceivable that if these drums, taken from along, a whole 1,000-meter strip of this, if we get back 30, 40 data points evenly spaced in the upper and lower parts of the bed and along the strike of the bed, and if those numbers come in consistently above 5 gram per ton, then all hell will break loose. If they come up erratic, some nothing, some really high, then that will become problematic. But that's the next big watershed news is, how does that ribbon, that 1,000 meter ribbon, how does it grade on multiple data spots? Right now, you can plug in any number you want. You can be a bear and plug in 2 grams per ton and this thing's worth nothing. It's a big giant geochemical anomaly, a science project. Or you can plug in 30 grams per ton, 1 ounce per ton, and you come up with some insane numbers. And the Wits 2.0 hypothesis says that whatever you find at Purdy's reward, in that little triangular piece of this conglomerate bed, you're going to find over a much vaster area. And that's why Novo has this valuation right now, just in terms of its 50% stake of Purdy's reward alone. It's about a $2.6 billion valuation right now, and that's way more than is justified for even this scenario that I come up with of, say, a $4 billion U.S. value for what's there. However, it's the idea that this could be replicated 100 times in its 7,000 square kilometers. This is the sort of stuff that is attracting the interest of players such as Sheikh Maktoum Asher from Dubai, and I think we're going to see a lot more big players come out of the woodwork with stakes in this story. But again, until we see more data points of how the grade behaves, we're going to be sort of in this little bit of a limbo here. And that's why I last week recommended Artemis, because in relative pricing terms, this stock could easily move up maybe double or triple from current levels before it sort of runs out of steam. This would be a relative valuation to Novo. But of course, if Artemis reaches that sort of valuation, then we are talking about Novo breaking out and going a lot higher. Incidentally, on November 10th and 11th is the Metals Investor Forum in Vancouver, where I am presenting, and Artemis Resources will be one of the companies in my session presenting their story, and management will be also around for the 2-day conference to ask questions about what they are seeing in the Pilbara play and what their funding strategy going forward is going to be.
John, thanks for the update.
You're welcome, Jim.
We've been talking with John Kaiser, his website, kaiserresearch.com. I'm Jim Goddard.
Comments made on Discovery Watch are an expression of opinion only and should not be construed in any manner whatsoever as recommendations to buy or sell any financial instrument at any time. Archived online at howstreet.com. Discovery Watch is a production of How Street Media Incorporated.